Welcome back to the Nerdy Grill and welcome to a brand new, not necessarily ranking video, but this is more of a moments video. So this one in particular, I'm going to be focusing on what I think personally are the darkest moments for each incarnation of the Doctor. Now in this particular video, I am going to be focusing on the modern series of the show. And if you would like to see a classic series version of the show, then please just remember to leave a like on the video to let me know that you want to see another part to this. So I'm only going to be focusing on the modern era of the show. So I will be talking Christopher Eccleston all the way to Ncuti Gatwa. And just before we start, I will not be including the War Doctor or the Fugitive Doctor in this list because, in fairness, those two incarnations were sort of made to be a little bit dark and are from dark periods of the Doctor's life. So I thought trying to pick a darkest moment for them would be really difficult, especially since they've not had much screen time and you'd have to then delve into Big Finish and stuff as well. So I'm only going to be focusing on Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, both versions of David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, Jodie Whittaker, and Ncuti Gatwa in this list. Now, I'm going to be picking two moments for each Doctor, a runner-up, and then a chosen winner darkest moment. So there'll be two moments for each Doctor, but only one will be crowned the winner. And just keep in mind, this is my own personal opinion, and there is tons of different moments from each Doctor's era that I could have selected for this, and I will probably mention them when I go through each Doctor. But these are just the ones that stood out to me as, because usually the Doctor, he's our protagonist. He's supposed to be the guy that we look up to. But at moments he does break, whether that's due to a lack of a companion by his side to keep him on the straight and narrow, or just something really ticks him the wrong way. But without any further ado, we're going to jump straight into the first section of this ranking every Doctor's darkest moment.
Why don't you finish the job and make the Daleks extinct? Rid the universe of your filth! Why don't you just die?
Of course, to start this off, we need to talk about Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor. Now, obviously, I've got two moments to talk about in particular. There's a lot for the Ninth Doctor, to be fair, because this is the Doctor that has just come off the Time War. So he is a Doctor that is full of rage and terror, and could go on a rampage at the snap of his fingers, to be perfectly honest. And at the time, we thought this could be the Doctor that has actually fought in the Time War as well. We didn't really know about John Hurt's incarnation at that point in time. But I have picked two moments from the Ninth Doctor to talk about. So firstly, we have got the runner-up. So the runner-up moment for me is the scene in Dalek where he is literally torturing a Dalek. Van Statten has thrown the Doctor in to the area where the Dalek is being kept, and the Dalek and the Doctor are basically having a conversation. It's the first time the Doctor's seen a Dalek in forever since the Time War. He is terrified, he is petrified, but once he discovers that the Dalek can't harm him, he then changes his mentality and changes his stance. He starts teasing and taunting the Dalek. He circles it like it's his prey and he's the predator. You know, he really gets a bit sinister and nasty, and it all comes down to and climaxes with the Doctor basically electrocuting the Dalek and causing the Dalek to scream out in agony and pain, staring deadpan into the Dalek's eyes, and basically saying, yeah, you've never had any mercy, because the Dalek is screaming in pain and wants mercy and pity. And he's like, yeah, you never did. And so he just increases the voltage, watching the Dalek suffer. And the only reason the Dalek gets out of this alive is because Van Statten and his crew come in and stop the Doctor and drag him away. And so that really goes to show that the Doctor has lost the plot at that point. So I thought, yeah, that is definitely a dark moment for our hero, our main protagonist of the show. And it goes to show how much the Daleks really affected the Doctor back then. But the moment in particular that I have decided to put as my winning crowning moment for the Ninth Doctor in terms of his darkness has to go to him letting Cassandra die in The End of the World, only the second episode of the series. So Cassandra has lured all these people in. They've all decided to watch the sun expand and blow up and burn and take the Earth with it. So they've all come to gather and watch this spectacular spectacle. Different aliens from like the upper class, you know, the rich. Cassandra's supposedly the last human, but she's been like killing people off and threatens to annihilate everyone on the satellite. And teleport away at the last minute. But the Doctor figures out her plan, brings her back, but without the aid of her little servants who help to keep her alive. And as she starts to dry out due to the increased temperature, the Doctor just mocks her for it and watches her slowly die as Rose, the new companion, is begging him to help her. And even you can hear her in the background creaking and being like, oh Doctor, have pity. And the Doctor's basically just like, yeah, everything has its time and everything dies. And he's just staring down the barrel. She literally explodes with blood and skin everywhere. And he just turns and walks away. And Rose is just baffled with what she's just seen. But yeah, they were some really dark moments, and that really goes to show the character growth of the Ninth Doctor. He is that evil and sinister at the start, and then by the end he starts to get that humanity back. But the Ninth Doctor is not someone to mess with. And that is also does linger over into his next incarnation.
Then do it! Do it! Just do it! Do it!
Of his next incarnation, we've obviously got the 10th Doctor, played by David Tennant. Now, there was two moments in particular for the 10th Doctor, and the first one, or the runner-up for me, which for some reason people might be their favourite or what should be the winner, for me is the Time Lord Victorious arc, the climax of it from the Waters of Mars. Basically, at this point, the Doctor has sort of, again, he's sort of lost the plot. You know, he's been given a prophecy saying that he's going to die. You know, he's come to the realization he's the last of the Time Lords, and he's sick and tired of seeing people die. And so he sort of snaps a little bit and sort of takes matters into his own hands and saves a group of people who shouldn't have died. Should have died and shouldn't have lived. He actually saves a couple of them, basically changing history. And Adelaide Brooke, who is sort of the temporary companion of that particular episode, basically calls the Doctor out on it and says that no one should be able to have that power. It's wrong. Is that going to affect my future, my future children, grandchildren, things like that? And the Doctor basically gives her the answer of, yeah, it might do, but it don't matter. You're alive now and I can do what I want. And for a long time, I thought that I was just a survivor, but I'm not. I'm a winner. And then you can see that the Doctor's almost teetering into master territory there. He is sort of abusing his powers as a Time Lord and the ability to travel in space and time. And for his eyes, being the only surviving member of the Time Lords, he's abusing that to hell. And it is clear that Adelaide is not happy about that and really calls him out on it. So it really goes to show that the 10th Doctor, despite all his lovey-dovey stuff that he goes on in his era, does have a very sinister and dark side to him, you know, that we need to be wary of. Now, I'm going to mention this one very quickly before I move on to the winner. I haven't actually put this one on here, but yeah, I'm going to give just a brief mention to, obviously, the scene in The Runaway Bride with the Rachnos Empress. Yeah, where the Doctor just lets the Rachnos Empress watch her babies drown, and Donna is then screaming at the Doctor to stop and to help, but the Doctor just is not. Yeah, that one's not on here, but that is a very, very dark scene, and I will admit I was tempted to put that one on here. But my actual winner is actually going to his punishment of the family of blood from Human Nature and the family of blood. The Doctor has just got his personality and Time Lord essence back now because he was disguised as a human to hide from the family, who were seeking him out to take his Time Lord powers, rule the universe, blah, blah, blah. Typical evil bad guy plot. But rather than just basically take them to an abandoned planet or just take them to basically the equivalent of space jail, he decides to punish them in some of the most cruel and twisted ways possible. He traps the father in unbreakable chains that can never be removed, so he is trapped forever. He kicks Mother of Mine into basically like a black hole of a dying star to forever fall and break up. He traps Daughter of Mine in a mirror dimension, and she's in every mirror forever, and he comes back to visit her, which I actually think is worse. He basically comes back every year to gloat that she's trapped, and I'm like, God, Doctor, that is evil. And then traps Son of Mine as a scarecrow to guard over the fields and the lands of Earth for all eternity. He honestly punishes them in some of the cruelest ways possible, that death would have been mercy for them. But he goes a bit too far, and he shows a lack of mercy and a lack of pity. There is some moments where 10 really, really crosses the line and crosses the territory into the Master, if I'm being perfectly honest. And again, this continues on then into his next incarnation as well.
Oh, look, I'm angry, that's new. I'm really not sure what's going to happen now.
The 11th Doctor, played by Matt Smith. My runner-up dark moment for the 11th Doctor is going to go to a moment from A Town Called Mercy, where basically the 11th Doctor snaps after hearing some home truths from Carla Jex and decides to kick him out of the town of Mercy, which the residents there are being hunted down by like a cyborg known as the Gunslinger, who's threatening to kill them all if they don't give Carla Jex over to him. He decides to snap because Carla Jex calls him out on basically being a soldier, throws him out of the town called Mercy and holds him at gunpoint and doesn't allow him to come back across the line. Basically like, now you're going to stay there, you're going to get murdered by the Gunslinger, and if you try to come back over, I've got a gun to your head and I'm going to shoot you point blank in the head if you try it. Well, the Doctor does say, I don't actually know what I'm going to do, but you can see the evil look in his eyes as he holds down the gun, and no one can convince him to turn around apart from Amy, and then Amy and him have a mini heart-to-heart, but the Doctor does sort of give a mini outburst to Amy, basically saying, like, I can't keep letting people get away with it, and every time I show mercy, like with the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Master, cause people to die because of my mercy. You can tell that the Doctor is sort of sick and tired of letting people get away with things, and he's not going to let him get away with it, and thinks almost that he deserves to die. And that almost takes the Doctor back to like the War Doctor era, where as long as he gets the ultimate goal, if one or two people can't make it out alive, so be it. Think about the many as opposed to the few. And Amy sort of has to remind him of who he is, and it's a very, very dark moment for the 11th Doctor, who is, in my opinion, quite an upbeat Doctor, but he does have a lot of moments where he snaps in his era. Which brings me on to my winning moment for the 11th Doctor. And I have decided to go for an episode from the same series, from Series 7, and from Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, where he basically abandons Solomon, played by David Bradley, who plays the first Doctor now, basically abandons him and lets him die out in space as punishment for what he's done. So basically you've got Solomon, who's this like collector, trader, collects famous people and artifacts. He invaded a Silurian ship, killed the Silurians in order to steal the dinosaurs and sell on the dinosaurs. And basically the Doctor's like had enough of that, so just decides to use the missiles that Solomon had were being fired and basically like home them in on Solomon's ship, trapping Solomon on his own ship. The Doctor goes back to the main ship and leaves Solomon there to die and blow up in space, and shows no mercy at all. Doesn't even give him an option to leave. He's just like, nah, you're gonna die, I don't care, goodbye Solomon, you deserve this. And it's just like, Doctor, really? And he feels nothing. He just goes back to the TARDIS crew, gets in the TARDIS and leaves, and feels nothing for basically just committing murder, which, yeah, sure, he didn't commit as much as Solomon did, but really, two negatives don't make a positive, Doctor. And that's sort of a running theme of the 11th Doctor's era, to be honest. But things only get kind of worse to a degree when you then get into the next incarnation.
But I strongly advise you to keep out of my way. You'll find that it's a very small universe when I'm angry with you.
We've got the 12th Doctor, my favourite incarnation from the modern era of the show. And 12, it was quite difficult to actually pick some moments, especially since they've got to be earlier moments in his era. So my runner-up moment for the 12th Doctor is actually from Face the Raven, the episode where Clara dies, by a bird, as the toy maker would say. Basically, he threatens a shielder, or me as she's now known, because Clara is basically doomed. She's dead, she's going to die. The Doctor can't cope with that, and basically threatens me to help save Clara. Otherwise, he's going to bring all of his greatest foes and enemies to her front doorstep, tear down the nice calm street that she has built, the nice civilization she has built, tear it apart and watch it all burn, and rain hell on her for the rest of time. And it is scary. And there is a moment then at the end of the episode, after Clara has unfortunately died, because the Doctor does get calmed down a little bit by Clara. But once Clara is out of the picture and not there to protect me, he tries to apologise, but the Doctor basically says, yeah, nah, I'm not having that. You know, Clara did make me promise to, stay away from you and not hurt you, but I basically advise you to keep out of my way, because if I come across you again, it's a very small universe when I'm angry with you, so I'm not going to be held responsible for my actions. And I'm like, what are you going to do, Doctor, if you bump into a shielder again? Are you just going to murder her point blank? Which... he does meet a shielder again later on down the line, but we're not here to talk about that. But yeah, it is just like, what on earth, Doc? That is very dark and very eerie. That's not the Doctor we know and love. The Doctor even says in the first scene that the Doctor is no longer here, you are stuck with me. And I'm like, yeah, that is like the equivalent of War Doctor again. He's gone back to that, and it's like, I don't care what happens. You will save her or feel my wrath. But then the winning moment for me, which it was really tough, but this sort of came down to a very undoctorish thing to do. This also comes from the same series. It comes from the infamous episode Hellbent. You know the scene I'm talking about. I'm, of course, talking about the Doctor. Once he saved Clara, taking her out of her time stream in order to try and save her, he breaks every law of Gallifrey, and basically when stopped by some of the Time Lord guards and the General, he basically point blank points a gun at the General, and he shoots the General dead. The General does obviously regenerate. He does slightly check what regeneration the General is on, but it is still a very un-Doctor thing to do, to just point blank kill someone. And he was going to just kill him anyway. It was only when Clara starts to come up behind the Doctor and says, like, I don't want this, I don't like this, that he sort of then double takes and checks. Before then, it looked like the Doctor was just going to shoot if Clara hadn't said anything. And so I'm like, wow, that is dark, Doc. You need to calm down. And those effects do affect the Doctor going forward for the rest of that incarnation's era. Right, but we also then have the next incarnation, which was a little bit harder to pinpoint. Yeah, the 13th Doctor was a lot harder to pinpoint, because for most of her era, she is very bubbly and very cheery. But the runner-up position, I decided, is going to go to more of just her being a bit uncaring, to be honest. It's the scene that was talked about when the episode aired, is obviously the Doctor basically ignoring Graham's cancer talk and scare. So obviously Graham has been a sufferer of that, he confides in the Doctor because he no longer has Grace or Ryan, really, and he doesn't really talk to Ryan much about it. But he's trying to confide in the Doctor, hoping that the Doctor would help because he sees her as a friend. But the Doctor just sort of is a bit blasé to it and just sort of ignores him, and is she even says, I'm very socially awkward. But she's just basically like, so I'm just going to move away and stand over here and play with the TARDIS, basically, and then later on I might have come up with something that would have been more relevant now. And I don't buy the whole socially awkward thing. Yes, the Doctor is socially awkward. Yes, that incarnation may be a little bit more so. But you're still the Doctor. You've had deep conversations with companions before. And it's just a bit rude and disrespectful to blow it away like that. And it's a bit nasty. And so I'm kind of like, yeah, that is kind of evil and dark, if I'm perfectly honest. But it was very touch and go as to whether I was going to incorporate that into the list. But yeah, very un-Doctor-like, if I'm honest. But the winner I personally went for for 13. Again, it was difficult because 13 doesn't really have an awful lot of dark moments per se. But I sort of went from the episode Spyfall Part 2, where she sells out the Master to the Nazis. Obviously, the Master has managed to work his way up using a perception filter in order to become like the leader of the Nazis and help to hunt down the Doctor through time and space. The Doctor basically uses that to her advantage, eventually knocking out the perception filter so that all the Nazis will be able to see that the Master isn't exactly the Aryan archetype that he is claimed to be because of his new incarnation. And basically the Nazis end up catching up with him, and the Master hints later on in the future that he had to spend years and years being tormented and tortured. And yeah, I'm like, Doc, you really made the Master go through that and then left? I mean, damn, Doc, there's some lines that you just don't cross. And I'm like, and this incarnation in particular crossed one of those lines? Wow, didn't expect that. But yeah, 13 was a lot harder to pinpoint, which is also the case with the next incarnation as well. 14 only having 3 stories was really difficult to sort of include in this list, but I felt like I wanted to include 14 into this list. So I decided to go with, for the runner-up, basically his decision to banish the Toymaker from existence completely, to not have a purpose or any form of existence in this particular universe, and to trap him and bound him in salt and bound him in a box for all eternity. This wasn't a decision that the 15th Doctor made. The 15th Doctor actually let the 14th Doctor make this decision. And I just thought, you know, I mean, obviously the Toymaker deserves it, you know. This is why it's a difficult decision and why it's only the runner-up. But I just thought it was a little bit callous of him to just, that was his first thought. He didn't like tally up everything that he's done. He sort of just went, yeah, no, my prize is I'm going to banish you and remove you from existence forever. And you watch slowly as the Toymaker basically folds in on himself and then gets packaged away like paper into a box and sealed for all eternity. And 14's just got this blank deadpan look on his face like, good, the entire time. And I'm like, damn, that's really, really harsh. But to be fair, 14 has been through the ringer in that story and in the last couple of episodes, so I don't entirely blame him. But I'm like, yeah, you can see that this Doctor is no messing, if I'm perfectly honest. And again, played by David Tennant once again, so he gets to shine in both the good and the dark moments. But then moving on then into my actual winner from 14, I've decided, again, it's been difficult for 14. I had to go with the Salt from Wild Blue Yonder. More to do with the fact that it has serious consequences for the future of the show. Him just invoking the superstition, the magic, the black magic, you know, the old magic of the day, you know, doing all that just, you know, without really thinking about the consequences, and unleashing the Toymaker on the world, unleashing Sutekh, unleashing the Susan Twist stuff, you know, all the other gods coming around like Maestro and Lux. The Doctor's responsible for that just because he's just like, yeah, I'm just going to do this without really thinking about the consequences. You know, I mean, come on, Doc, you really need to think about it here and what's going to happen. And as a result, you've caused all these potential deaths and things in the future. And God knows what else you've also unleashed other than just the Pantheon. So, yeah, I'm kind of a bit like that with 14. It's really not as cut and dry as some other incarnations. But I will say that I think the 15th Doctor, the final one on this list, really does take the cake.
Into the void, and I will stand and watch you freeze to death.
And we've got Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor, the most recent Doctor to leave our screens last year. Now, he was a Doctor that sort of was very emotionally unstable in a lot of episodes. Obviously, the Doctor known for crying all the time, but the one thing that he always missed was having dark tendencies and dark elements because he didn't have enough time to expand upon them. However, there is 2 moments in his era that do stand out for me that are extremely dark and could have been really interesting if allowed to blossom in future seasons that are obviously not going to come now. the runner-up that I've decided actually comes from his first actual full-length episode, The Church on Ruby Road, where he decides that in order to get rid of the Goblin King, he is going to impale him on the church spire. Yeah, you watch the Doctor use these new gloves, you know, Mavity gloves or whatever they're calling them, I can't remember, to drag down the ship and watch as the spire point bit on the church goes up through the ship, pierces through the Goblin King's chest, and you watch him flail around in pain while the Doctor is none the wiser and doesn't really care about the consequences. He knew what he was doing because he dragged the ship purposely down on there. He knew that someone was going to get infected by that. And I'm like, damn, that's where you went to? You didn't just want to try and shoot the thing into space, give him a talking to, whatever, teleport him away, whatever. No, you wanted to impale him through the chest. I'm like, damn, Doc, what is going on here? So yeah, very dark to start out with. And if this was, you know, what was going to go forward with 15, then we were in for a wild ride. But that didn't end up being the case. However, the winner for the darkest moment from 15, and could be for the whole of the new series, but definitely for 15, definitely comes from the Interstellar Song Contest, where basically he decides to give Kid a taste of his own medicine, uses, again, these Mavity gloves to basically install and give Kid these form of, like, electric shocks for every person that Kid was planning on killing as the result of his plan during the Interstellar Song Contest. Over, I think, 3 trillion people were going to die, and he wasn't going to care. So the Doctor torments Kid and gives him 3 trillion shocks. Keeps going. Just keeps pulling it down and watches as Kid is wailing in pain and agony and torture, and not even hearing the voice of Susan, his own granddaughter, in his head pleading with him to stop, can make him stop. He continues on and on and on, and it is evil and actually made me sick to my stomach, but in almost a good way, because I'm like, wow, we're really seeing a different side to the Doctor here. Good character. This could be the start of something good, because Belinda catches him in action with this, but unfortunately, we never see anything develop from this. So it was pointless, and it was a random act of callousness from the Doctor, who, throughout most of his era, was quite jolly. So it just seems really out of left field here. Which is a shame, because it could have been something in really good, if I'm perfectly honest. But yeah, so that is going to be it for my, not necessarily ranking, but for my personal thoughts and discussion on what I think to be the darkest moment for each of the modern era Doctors. Now, like I said, if you would like to see a classic series version of this list for William Hartnell to Paul McGann, then please leave a like on this video and comment down below your thoughts on what your darkest moment would be. But remember to keep all comments respectful, please, and subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Girl signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.